This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's a Simchas to see all the Chaverim again, to be together for Illuminates Torah. So last year on Cholamoid, we spoke about the Inyan that in Parshas Re'eh, when it talks about the Yom Tovim, so there's a diak nifla of Rav Meir Simcha. Rav Meir Simcha's medayik that by the Yom Tif of Pesach, it says that there's a chiyuv of Aliyah l'regel. You go b'makom asher yivchar Hashem, and the pasuk says l'shakein shemay sham. And then by Shavuos it says you go to the Mikdash, makom asher yivchar Hashem, l'shakein shemay sham. And then when it comes to the Yom Tif of Sukkah, it says makom asher yivchar Hashem, and it doesn't say l'shakein shemay sham. So we brought out the idea that the kedusha of the Sukkah is like kedushas Beis Hamikdash. The Sukkah has a din of Makom HaMikdash. In fact, there's a Sifri that has a Havamina. We didn't mention this last year. The Sifri has a Havamina that you're only allowed to make a Sukkah Bahar Abayis. And the Sifri said, no, you can make a Sukkah Af B'Gvulin. What's the Havamina? You can only make a Sukkah Bahar Abayis. Because the Pshat is the Sukkah is Kedushas HaMikdash. The Mela, the Gemara has the Sifri has a Havamina that you can only make a Sukkah on the Har Abayis itself. So we want to thank the host of Show Yaakov Klein. So, what? Yank. Not Shmuel? Oh. For hosting this event and bringing the Kedushas HaMikdash to this Sukkah. And Mamela should be nispashe to all of our Sukkahs. The Aruch Ner, we know the Aruch Ner has two sections, two chalakim on Sukkah. He has the Lamdus HaMasechta Sukkah. He also has on Halacha the Bikur Yaakov. So amazingly, he opens up Bikur Yaakov. Usually, Mechabrim, when they start their Svarim, they start with words that are Rosh Tevas Yud Kei Vav Kei. But he starts Bikur Yaakov with words that are Rosh Tevas first Yud Kei Vav Kei, and then Aleph Daled Non Yud. He starts Yismechu HaYesharim V'Yagilu HaAshurim Af Dalei Nachalas Yisrael. And I'm sure everybody's familiar. Why does he begin the Sefer this way? Because it's well known, all the Svarim bring down, that the word Sukkah is B'Gematria 91. Of course, we're familiar. It's the two Shemos of Hashem, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, and the Aleph Daled Non Yud. Says Bikur Yaakov, Yoim Simchaseinu v'Simchasoi Mechupeles. It's a double Simcha. Presumably, it has something to do with the fact that they're the two Shemos of Hashem. He says, V'yizaru ma'oid l'kayim mitzvah Sukkah. It's not on the sheet. You should be very careful to l'kayim the mitzvah of Sukkah. Shemispar Shema Tzadi Aleph Kemispar Shnei Shemos HaKadoshim Shekoilalam Amen. The two Shemos that make up Amen. Ukdushasai Mechupeles. The Kedusha of Sukkah is double, presumably because of the two Shemos. And then he throws in a line that all the Balei Darshanim darshan, and they say Lomdus, and they say Drashos. What does he say? V'hamekayma kihilchasa yichbalu scharei min hashamayim. Someone who's mekayim mitzvah sukkah, he'll get double schar. He gets double schar. V'hamekayma kihilchasa yichbalu scharei min hashamayim. So what's the pshat? Why, if you're mekayim in the mitzvah of sukkah, is it yichbalu scharei? Why do you get double schar? It doesn't say by the mitzvah of tefillin you get double schar, even though there's tvon shoyan, tvon shorosh. It doesn't say by shofar, even though there's tkiyas the mu'umad, tkiyas the miyushav, that you get double schar. It doesn't say by any mitzvah yichbulu loy scharoi. What's pshat in the Aruch Ner and the Bikur Yaakov that v'hamakaymoi yichbulu loy scharoi? Could be you could say pshat al pi lamdus two ways. I was only going to say one, but there's such a chashuv item I have to say two ways. Everybody knows there's a famous machlokes Rabbi Kiva Eger and the Pnei Yeshua. Avada, there's a chiyuv to eat in the sukkah, and if you're in the sukkah, you're makayim a mitzvah. What's the halacha if somebody eats out of the sukkah? So he's an avarian. He's an mevatel mitzvah saseh. Let's say somebody doesn't blow shofar. So he's mevatel a mitzvah saseh b'shev al taseh. He's a mevatel b'shev al taseh. In other words, how much money would a person have to give up to be mekayim the mitzvah of shofar? Only a chaymesh, right? Only a chaymesh, only a fifth. Because you're mevatel at b'shev al taseh. Let's say someone is not mekayim tefillin. Someone doesn't put on tefillin. So he's mevatel mitzvah saseh b'shev al taseh. But what if somebody eats outside of the sukkah? Are you mevatel a mitzvah saseh b'sheva altasa? Or do we say, no, it's worse than that. You're actively eating bekum v'aseh outside of the sukkah. So now you're being mevatel the mitzvah saseh b'yadayim. So it's not just sheva altasa not eating in the sukkah. It's kum v'aseh not eating in the sukkah. It's a famous machlokes, achronis machlokes, Pnei Yeshua and Rabbi Kiva Eger. Rabbi Kiva Eger just says, you're mevatel mitzvah saseh b'sheva altasa. You didn't eat in the sukkah. The fact that you're eating, it's not a maisa of an avera. You're eating. The only avera is you're not going into the sukkah. So it's b'sheva altasa being mevatel aseh. Pnei Yeshua says no. Pnei Yeshua says that if you eat outside of the sukkah, you're bekum v'aseh violating yeshiva sukkah. So it could be, what the Aruch LaNer is saying, is that if somebody eats in the sukkah, schoroi mechupeles, you get double schar. Why? Because the Aruch LaNer holds like the Pnei Yeshua. So that means if you're eating in the sukkah, you're being mekayim two things. You're kum v'aseh eating in the sukkah, and you're being mekayim the zehirus from the lav of not eating in the sukkah. Because the same way if someone eats out of the sukkah, they're bekum v'aseh eating out of the sukkah. If someone eats in the sukkah, they're mekayim the miklal aseh, lav haba miklal aseh. So schoroi mechupelas, because you're being mekayim two inyanim, the aseh, and not violating the violation of the aseh. Is that what the Aruch LaNer means? Some say
how we're going to give double. But Rabbi is just
so you say or maybe the Pshat Aruch LaNer is like this. Another lamdas. But it's not going to be a lamdas shashir, but just a little appetizer. If you look in Hilchos Uluves, Hilchos Sukkah in the Rambam, in Perek Vav, the Rambam says like this. Listen to this. This is the Rambam, Perek Vav, Halacha Hey. Keitzad hi mitzvahs hayeshiva b'sukkah. Sheyia oichel v'shoisa v'dar b'sukkah kol shivas hayamim. You eat, you drink, you live in the sukkah 7 days. Bein b'yoyim, bein b'layla. V'chol shivas hayamim oisa adam es beisay arai v'sukasay keva. Keitzad. Kelim anoim. Matzois hanois b'sukkah. Your nice kelim should be in the sukkah. Klei shtia kagan hashishas v'koisos b'sukkah. Then the Rambam Halacha Vav. Oichlin v'shoisin v'yeshenim b'sukkah kol shiva. You eat, you drink, you sleep in the sukkah 7 days. So I'm telling you, he just said that in Halacha Hey. He just said in Halacha Hey that you eat in the sukkah, you drink in the sukkah, all of the tzrachim should be in the sukkah. Why? The Rambam says the exact same Halacha and Halacha Vav. Take a look it up yourself. It's not on the sheet, so don't trust me on this one. Perek Vav, Halacha Hey is Keitzari mitzvahs hayeshiva, oichel v'shoisa. Halacha Vav, oichlin v'shoisim. All right. So what's the pshat? Pshat is like this. Rav Meshulam David Soloveitchik, the Briska, the Rosh Yeshiva Brisk today, he says the following Yisai. Yisai is like this. There's two halachos in Sukkah. There are two halachos in Sukkah. There's one halacha, there's a mitzvah doiraisa, that when you eat, you have to eat in the sukkah. When you drink, you have to drink in the sukkah. When you sleep, you have to sleep in the sukkah. That's a halacha, it's a mitzvah saseh doiraisa. You have to eat, drink, sleep in the sukkah. There's a completely different inyan. So now we'll start this year. The Mishnah in Sukkah says, Chavches Beis, Kol Shivas Hayomim. The guys from the 510s, they know it by heart, right? They don't need a shit. Kol Shivas Hayomim, right? For all 7 days, Adam Oisa Sukkasoi Keva. You need to make your Sukkah Keva. That halacha is not that the gavra, that the person has to eat in the Sukkah, that you have to drink in the Sukkah, you have to sleep in the Sukkah. Fashteitzach, that's the mitzvah d'oraisa. You have to eat, drink, do your tzrachim in the Sukkah. There's a separate halacha. The halacha is, you need to make your Sukkah keva. You need to make the chefza of the Sukkah the main place of your dwelling, not your personal obligation. Avada, you have a personal obligation. You have a chiyuv to eat in the Sukkah. You have a chiyuv to drink in the Sukkah. But let's say a person says, I'm not hungry, I'm not thirsty, I'm not tired. There's still a mitzvah to take the sukkah and eat in it, and drink in it, and sleep in it, to make the sukkah keva. There's one halacha, din d'oraisa, mitzvah saseh, of eating and sleeping in the sukkah. That's the mitzvah on the person. And there's another mitzvah to make the sukkah keva. L'mashal, there's a halacha. Let's say on the last day of Sukkot, so you eat lunch, and then you say, you know what, I'm not going to be eating anymore. I want to take down the sukkah, I want to clear out my table, I want to bring out the kelim. Are you allowed to do that? The Gemara says you're not allowed to do that. Why not? I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to sleep, I'm not going to... The answer is, that's mavato, the inyan of making the sukkah a sukkah's keva for 7 days. That means for a few hours of the 7 days, your sukkah is not a sukkah's keva. You've taken out the table, you've taken out the bed. That's the inyan of kol shivas hayomim adam oisa sukkasai keva. That's what Rabbi Meshulam David Soloveitchik is medaik from the fact that the Rambam says in halacha hey and halacha vav oichlin b'sukkah, because in halacha hey the Rambam says v'oisa sukkasai keva. That's one halacha. The second halacha is your personal obligation. So it could be, suggests Rabbi Yerucham Oshen in the new Yerech L'Mayadim, it just came out, Erev Yom Tov, that what the Aruch Laner means, that if v'hamakayim, someone who's makayim, the mitzvah of Sukkah, yichbelu scharai, your schar will be doubled. Why will your schar be doubled? Because you're makayim to inyanim. You're makayim the inyan of your personal chiyuv of eating in the Sukkah, and you're makayim the inyan of oiseh sukkasai keva. L'chayra, both of these mahalchim that we said al pi lamdos are really drush in the words of the Aruch Laner. Because l'chayra, that's not what he's saying. He's saying, he starts off with his Rashi Tevos Yud Kei Vav Kei, and he starts with the Rashi Tevos Aleph Dalet Nun Yud, and he says there are two shemos in the Sukkah, and therefore Simchasai Mechupelas, and therefore he says Kedushasa Mechupelas, and he says V'hamakayma Yichbelu Scharai. So it would seem that what the Aruch Laner is saying is somehow the fact that the Sukkah has in it the two shemos of Hashem. That is why Scharai Mechupelas, because the Sukkah encompasses the Yud Kei Vav Kei and the Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. So therefore we like to explore a little bit what's the pshat in these words of the Aruch Laner, that V'hamakayma Scharai Mechupelas. Okay. So the Mishnah begins. So this is where we start on the sheet. Now you feel more comfortable, you have the sheet. This is more the traditional way the shiurim go. Okay. So the Mishnah says like this. The Mishnah says, when you allow to clear in mishatisach hamakafa, when the soup, when the porridge congeals, when it gets ruined. Mush loy mush. They give a mush. What is it analogous to? Le'eved sheba limzoi kois l'rabbi. You have a servant, and he comes limzoi kois to dilute the kois for his master. It doesn't say what the master is drinking, but if it needs mizug, then l'chara he's drinking wine. And how are you moizig wine? With mayim. And here the Adoin has a cup of wine, and the Eved is coming to pour water in the cup. And when the Eved comes, the master spills the cup of water in his face. He says, get out of here, I'm not interested. That's what rain on Sukkot is analogous to. That here we want to be Mekayim a mitzvah, and the Yivon Shalom doesn't allow us to be Mekayim a mitzvah. Just like somebody who comes to pour water into the kois of his master, and the master throws the water in his face. Comes the Vilna Gaon in the Sefer Yahel Or. The Yahel Or is the Gaon's commentary to the Zohar HaKadosh. And at the end of Parshas Pinchas, he has Likutim on Parshas Pinchas. And many of these Marmakoms I got from the Sefer Zaman Simchasenu from Rav David Cohen, the Rosh Yeshiva of Hebron. And he quotes, says the Gaon, he quotes Rav Noach, the father-in-law of maybe Rav Aveli Fasvaler, I don't know, I'm not sure who that is. I don't know. But he quoted over in the name of the Mishnah's Chasidim. Who's the Mishnah's Chasidim? Mishnah's Chasidim is, the Munkach said the Mishnah's Chasidim is the Mishnah Torah on the Sifrei Kabbalah. The Mishnah's name, Rav Immanuel Chai Riki. The Mishnah's Chasidim. So here's the Goin. Can you imagine? The Goin is quoting the Mishnah's Chasidim. And the Goin is bothered by the following question. And the Kol Elio, the question is clarified even more. The kash is like this. We know that if Chazal give a mashal, then none of the details are extra. Every detail is critical to understand the nekuda that Chazal are trying to bring out. So let the mashal just say that an Eved that comes to bring a cup of water to the master, and the master spills it in his face. Why get into the fact that the master has a cup of wine, and the Eved is coming to pour water into the wine, and the Adain doesn't want the water, he just wants the wine, and he spills the water in his face? What does the wine have to do with anything? Just say, an Eved comes to bring water to the master, and the master says, go fly a kite, I'm not interested. Why? Balimzoi kois l'Rabbi. What's the nekuda of balimzoi kois l'Rabbi? Says the Goin, Yayin represents dinim, midas hadin. In fact, the word kois is the Gematria 86, Elohim, midas hadin. What's the nekuda? The nekuda is, the master has yayin. It's very harsh, it's very strong. It's midas hadin. The Eved is coming limzoik, to soften it, to be mamtik, to sweeten it, to make more midas harachamim. And the other says, no, I don't want the water. I don't want to be mamtik the yayin. I don't want to soften the midas hadin. So too says Vilna Gaon. Rosh Hashanah is Yom Hadin. Midas hadin is yayin. Yom Kippur is midas hadin. Comes the Yom Tif of Sukkot, and now we finally have an opportunity through the midas hachesed to be mamtik the dinim of the Yom Naram, through the lulav, through the daled minim, and primarily through the mitzvah of Sukkah. So when we're sitting in the Sukkah, says the Gaon, what we're doing is we're taking a zman of din. Now think, be'etzem Sukkot is not zman Simchas. In fact, halacha l'maisa, even the shitas that say that you don't have to be soymech gula l'tfila on Shabbos, right? Why would you not have to be soymech gula l'tfila on Shabbos? What's the makar to be soymech gula l'tfila? You l'ratzon nimrei fi v'agyon libi l'fanecha Hashem tzuri v'goy ali gula yancha Hashem yom tzara tefillah. That's the makar, right? Yotes and chaf are back to back. The makar for smichas gula tefillah, Gemara says in brachos, is tzuri v'goy ali yancha Hashem yom tzara. But Shabbos is not a yom tzara. They're shitas. You don't have to be soymech gula tefillah on Shabbos. But says the Ramah, but on Yom Tif you have to be soymech gula tefillah. Why? Because Yom Tif is not as man simcha. Yom Tif is be'etzem midas hadin. Why? Uvechag nidoinim al hamayim. Be'etzem Sukkot is a Yom Hadin. In fact, Sukkot is a greater Yom Hadin than any Yom Hadin. The Torah says that even though Pesach is a Yom Hadin and Shavuos is a Yom Hadin, Pesach is a Yom Hadin on Tfuah, on Shavuos is on Peres HaIlan. But the Torah says, Kol chaye ha'adam toloi b'mayim. The most tenuous, the most dangerous, the biggest sakana of Yom Hadin is Yom Hadin al hamayim. So be'etzem, Sukkot is also Yomim Noiraim. It's also fearful, awesome days. But al yedei the mitzvah of Sukkah and al yedei the daled minim, you could be mamtik the dinim. So on Sukkot, when we sit in the Sukkah, somehow we're being mamtik the dinim. And if the Rebbeinu Shalom makes it rain, so what's the Rebbeinu Shalom saying? No, I don't want you to be mamtik the dinim. I want the Yom Naram to continue. I want midas hadin to continue. So the mashal is perfect. Eved sheba limzoi kois l'Rabbi. And the rabbi says, no, I don't want the water, don't be moizik the kois, I want the dinim to continue. So the Goin says the mashal of the Mishnah is, every detail, every nuance of it is bringing out this nekuda of midas hadin. The yayin represents yomim nora midas hadin, and the mayim is mamtik the dinim. So we would like to try to understand is how is the mitzvah of Sukkah mamtik the dinim of Yom Naram? What about the mitzvah of Sukkah is sweetening the dinim of Yom Naram? Every Yom Tov has mitzvahs. The mitzvah of shofar obviously wasn't mamtik the dinim. The mitzvah of v'yinisem es nafshei seichem wasn't mamtik the dinim. What's the inyan? How is the Sukkah mamtik the dinim of the Yom Naram? So there are two psukim in Shiur Hashirim. They're almost identical with one very important difference. And this pasuk is the yesod of the writings of the Arizal and the Yom Tov of Sukkot. The pasuk is Sumoiloi tachas l'roishi v'yaminoi techabekeni. The left hand of the Rebbeinu Shalom is under my head. V'yaminoi in his right hand techabekeni. It embraces me. It hugs me. Simply put, the left hand represents midas hadin, and that's tachas l'roishi. The right hand is midas hachesed, and that is techabekeni, that embraces me. But notice the fact that in Shiur Hashirim, Perek Beis, Pasuk Vav, it's Smoiloi Tachas Liroishi, and in Perek Ches, it's Smoiloi Tachas Roishi, and there's no Lamed. The first part, Smoiloi Tachas Leroishi, the second time is Smoiloi Tachas Roishi. Comes the Arizal, the Ari HaKadosh says, what's Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippurim, Sukkahs? He says, Noida, Deboy, Liyachta, Kutchabrichu, Shchente. We need to be Miyached, the Ribbon Shalom, Kutchabrichu, and the Shechina. How are we Miyached? We say, those who say the L'Shem Yichud, they say, B'dechilu U'rechimu. B'dechilu is what? Yira. U'rechimu is Ahava. Says Arizal, V'hinei yesh chibuk. Okay, so now we immediately see there's a chiddush over here. And it's not necessarily, there are going to be two ways of understanding this pasuk. The simple way of understanding is there are two ways to be mechabek somebody. You could be you could hug somebody with the right hand, you could hug somebody with the left hand. And that seems to be what the Arizal is saying. There's a chibuk. There's a chibuk of smoiloi tachas l'roishi. The left hand under my head. That's called dechilu. That's yira. That's the tzad smoil. That's from Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippurim. That's the tzad smoil. But then comes Sukkahs. Sukkahs is rechimu, is ahava. That's the chibuk of the yamin. The yaminoi techabekeni. That's the mitzvah of nisach hamayim. That's the mitzvah of all the mitzvahs of the daled minim and the mitzvah of Sukkah. So Pashup Pshat, what the Arizal is saying is there are two types of chibuk. There's chibuk of the left hand, that's Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippurim. There's chibuk of the right hand, that's the Yemei HaSukkos. And the Arizal writes again in the Pri Eitz Chaim in number 7, V'noida ki ha'chesed nikro yamin. Chesed is called the right side. V'chag shel Sukkos is Yeminoi Techabekeni. That's from Yom Kippur until Shmini Atzeres. Okay. And then, by the way, there are many halachas. Even the Mishnah Berurah brings down. When you take Netilas Yadayim, you wash the left hand onto the right hand to be misgaber chesed over dinah. And there are many mekayros, by the way, that the right side is chesed and the left side is gevura. Most notably, the Tikkunei Zayar. Tikkunei Zayar says in number 8 in Tikkun, I think it's Chaf Aleph. Begavna didan yahiv oiraisa miyaminoi. The Torah, right? Avas oilam. The Torah is miyaminoi eish daslama. The Torah is the greatest ava. The Torah is the greatest chesed. The Torah came from the right hand of the Rebbe Shalom. Umismoila di'ihu gvura. Truth is, we don't need the Tikkunei Zayar. Rashi in Chumash says beferish, Yemincha Hashem nedari ba'koyach, Yemincha Hashem tiratzoyev. You know, in English, there's an expression. A guy who's shlemazel, what does he have? He has two left hands, right? He has two left hands. Yemincha Hashem nedori b'koyach, Yemincha Hashem tiratzoyev. What does Rashi say? Rashi says, Shnei pa'amim. Kishe Yisrael oisen retzoinoi shel malkoim hasmoil nasas yamin. So Rashi is clearly saying that the yamin is the midas hachesed. When Klal Yisrael is oisen retzoinoi shel malkoim, there are two yaminim. There's the yamin Hashem nadar v'koyach, yamin Hashem tiratzayev. And Rabbi Al Pi this Yisoid, there's a sefer Divrei Yeshua. Divrei Yeshua is from Rabbi Shua Heller, and he has a drush called Drush Beis HaTfilah. And he quotes the Zohar. The Zohar says like this: "The midrashay shel Harashbi, Shin Samachei Mismala, 365 from the left side, Midachilu de Gvura, from Yira of Gvura is Yahivu Pachad Yitzchak." That's associated with Yitzchak Avinu. Ramach 248 Miyamina from the right side, Mirachimu with Ahava de Darga de Avraham. And Rabbi Shua Heller, by the way, Rabbi Shua Heller was one of the Talmud Mufakim of the Reb Chaim Elazar. So he says like this: the 365 mitzvahs loisase, they come from Yira. There are two forces within a human being. There's Ava and there's Yira. Ava expands your koichos, brings out your koichos, motivates a person to action. So the mitzvah saseh, the 248 mitzvah saseh, come from Ava. The midah of Avas Hashem motivates, inspires a person to be mekayim the mitzvahs. That's the midah of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu is midas hachesed. That's the makar of the mitzvah saseh. The mitzvah Saloi Saseh, the 365, that comes from the left side. That comes from Midas Hagvura, Midas Hadin. The Midas Hadin, the Midas Hagvura, Hachad Yitzchak is the kayach of restraint. It restrains the person from doing what a person would want to do. And that's the makar from the mitzvah Saloi Saseh. So simply, based on these ideas, you have Yom Aram, you have Rosh Hashanah. You have Yom HaKippurim, and they're begeder smoiloi tachas l'roishi, Rosh Hashanah. And that's 10 days of the year. And then you have the Yom Tov of Sukkahs. Sukkahs is v'yiminoi tichabekeni. And the Bali Darshanim say, look at the Yamin. The Yamin is 1, 2, tefach. Right? Shnei defanois v'tefach. That's the Sukkah. There's a Sefer Ruach Eliyahu. Ruach Eliyahu was one of the early collections of the Chidushim of the Vilna Gaon and Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chaver. And he changes the whole understanding of the Arizal. You have to understand that the simple reading of the Arizal is a lot of the Torah of Sukkot is miyusad on the simple reading of the Arizal. But now we're gonna learn what we call a revolutionary understanding of the Arizal. Pashut Pshat again is the first days of Yom Naraim are Smoiloi Tachas Roshi. The second days, the Yimei HaSukkos are V'yiminoi Techabekim. Comes Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, quoted in the Ruach Eliyahu, look at number 13. We know the Kruvim represent the Isha represents the zivug between the Ribbon Shalom and Knesset Yisrael. The Mishkan itself was also the zivug between Knesset Yisrael and the Ribbon Shalom. That's why, let's see, who listens to the Shiurim? Yeah? Should I put you on the spot? Where was the Beis Hamikdash built? And who's Chelek? Binyamin. Why? Bechelkoi shel Yedid. Bechelkoi shel Yedid. Yavo Yedid, Ben Yedid, the Yivneh Yedid, Lebnei Yedidim, right? Why? Why is the Beis Hamikdash built? Bechelkoi shel Yedid. The word Yedid is a word that comes from two other words. Yad, two hands. So let's explain. Everything associated and connected with the Beis Hamikdash is associated with the word Yedid. Ma Yedidois Mishkan Isayach, it says in Tehillim Pei Daled. We say Shlomo HaMelech is Yedid. When he builds the Beis Hamikdash, it's called Yedid. When Avraham Avinu was in the Beis Hamikdash at the time of the Churban, the Gemara Menachos says Mali Yedidi Beveisi. What's the inyan? The Shamayim was created, the Gemara Ksubah says, with one yad. Right? V'imini tivcha Shamayim. Af yadi yasta aretz. That means the aretz was one yad. The Shamayim was one yad. But the Beis Hamikdash was, says the Gemara Ksubah, look at number 15, Darash bar kapara, Gedoyle masei tzadikim yoiser mi masei Shamayim v'aretz. De'ilu b'masei Shamayim v'aretz ksiv, af yadi yasta aretz. V'imini tivcha Shamayim. The Shamayim is one yad. The Aretz is one yad. But the Beis Hamikdash is shtei yadais. Shenemar machayin l'shivtecha pa'alta Hashem mikdash adoishem koinenu yadecha. So here you have enough in the Gemara. The Gemara is saying that even though the Shamayim needed one yad of Hashem and the Aretz needed one yad, the Mikdash needed two yadais of Hashem. What's the pshat? Simple pshat is, because what's the goal, what's the function of the Beis Hamikdash? The Beis Hamikdash is mechaber shamayim la'aretz. The tefillos of the aretz go up through the mikdash to the shamayim, and all the shefa comes down from the shamayim al yedei the mikdash to the aretz. So the shamayim is one yad, the aretz is one yad. The mikdash are shtei yados, because you need to be able to be mechaber the two yados of shamayim va'aretz. That's why wherever you see anything about Beis Hamikdash, it's always Yedid. Lebinyamin Amar Yedid Hashem Yishkan Lavet Achalav. Any connection in Tanakh to Beis Hamikdash, it's always called Yedid. Mali Yedidi Bevesi, Ma Yedidus Mishkan Isayach. Yedid is the word that encapsulates the Makam HaMikdash. Because the Mikdash is Mechaber Shamayim V'aretz. But says Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, look at number 13 on the third line. Ve'inyan hachibuk hu biyadayim. What is a hug? it's biyadayim, shehem beis yadayim. Why? Shal yedei hamishkan umikdash hayachibur beis hayadayim. Through the Beis Hamikdash, the two yadayim were now embracing. The yad of Shamayim, the yad of the Aretz, and now the two yados are connected. So what the Rabbi Yitzchak is saying is that a chibuk, it's not that Rosh Hashanah is just Smoiloi Tachas Roshi, and then Sukkah is only Viminoi Techabekeni. No, in order to have a chibuk, you need two yados. You need two yados. What does this mean? So explain like this. The Rabbi Yitzchak is actually explaining the Psukim in Koheles. It says, Eis lachvoik, there's a time to hug, ve'eis l'rachaik mechibuk, and a time to distance it. Says Rabbi Yitzchak, what's Eis lachvoik? At the time the Beis Hamikdash stood. Then the Rebbeinu Shalom was embracing Shamayim v'aretz, the two yados were together. And then by Churban Beis Hamikdash, that's when the chibuk was distanced. By the way, it could be, now we understand, we say in the Musaf of the Shalosh Regalim, Ve'ein anachnu yicholim mipnei hayad shenishtalcha b'mikdashecha. It should say, mipnei hayad sheshlucha. Rebbeinu Shalom sent forth the hand against the mikdash. Shenishtalcha implies it slipped away, the yad slipped away. What's the pshat? The fizeh, it's mamish beautiful. Now what's the Beis Hamikdash? The Beis Hamikdash is the chibuk of the shtei yadayim. It's the yad of Shamayim and the yad of the Oretz. But by the Churban Beis Hamikdash, he even says it like this: the Churban Beis Hamikdash oz lirchoik mechabek hishlich mishamayim eretz v'eretz Yisrael. The two yadayim were nesrachik. So mipnei hayod shenishtalcha b'mikdashecha. Now it's only one yad. Okay. So that's very interesting. So according to Rabbi Yitzchak, you could only have a chibuk b'shtei yadayim. So then it comes out that Sukkah is not v'minoi techabekeni. Sukkah is smoiloi tachas l'roshi v'yaminoi techabekeni. It's both. So you say, who needs the smoiloi tachas l'roshi? Forget the smoiloi tachas l'roshi. But let's stick with the Pashup Pshat in Arizal. That Sukkah is only v'minoi techabekeni. By the way, the Goin in Shir Hashirim says, what is the pasuk Smoiloi Tachas L'Roshi V'Minoi Techabekeni talking about? Smoiloi Tachas L'Roshi is Moshe Rabbeinu for the first 7 days of the Miluim. Moshe Rabbeinu was a Levi. The Leviim are Misitra de Gvura. Gvurais. But he was not able to bring down the Shechina. V'adayin lo shos Shechina until Aaron HaKoyen. Aaron HaKoyen is what? Koyen is mitzad chesed, oyev shalom, v'roidev shalom. That's the techabekeni. He was magdil the midah of Ava until the Shechina came. Now, Aaron HaKohen didn't send Moshe Rabbeinu out of the Mishkan when he brought down the Shechina. Moshe Rabbeinu still had to do the 7 days of we still needed Moshe's avodah of Smoiloi Tachas Roshi. But Aaron came in and he created the V'yiminoi techabekeni. Elsewhere, the going, okay. By the way, the Vilna Gaon points out why the first pasuk is Smoiloi Tachas Liroishi, and the second time it's Smoiloi Tachas Roishi. So the Gaon says that the greatest devekos of the Rebbeinu Shalom to Knesset Yisrael is the chibuk of Smoiloi Tachas Roishi v'Yimina Techabekeni. But ba'olam hazeh, it's not mamish b'dvekos mamish. Why? It's only liroshi. What does liroshi mean? Li means el, two. That means there's a hefsek davar muat. It's close to our head. Smoiloi tachas liroshi. But la'asad lavai, it's going to be smoiloi tachas roishi davuk mamish. So there's a chiluk between Perek Beis and Shir Hashirim and Perek Ches and Shir Hashirim. Okay. This afternoon, I went to the yeshiva to prepare the shir. And I was supposed to daven at 1:15 mincha. And I really wanted to daven 1:15 mincha, not only because the yeshiva davens a hoicha shmona esrei, but I wanted to daven in the yeshiva. And I had a visitor, and it pushed off my schedule, so I needed a place to daven in Kiwan Hills. So there's a Sfarim store. So I davened in the Sfarim store, and I found the sefer that made the shir, I never knew about this sefer, and I saw it on the shelf every time I went to the store. I didn't know what it was. It said Siddur Hagra on it. But I'm preparing for the shiur, and I see quoted Siddur Hagra, Siddur Hagra. I have the Siddur Hagra. Yeshiva that I'm at, they have many, many Siddur Hagras. But it quotes a Yisai from the Siddur Hagra, and it's not in the Siddur Hagra. So I pick it off the shelf, and sure enough, there's a different type of Siddur Hagra. There's a Siddur Hagra al pi nigla al pi nistar. So it had mamish this idea, the Iker Yisai of the shiur. In Shachris, we say a tefillah, if you make it on time, and you have extra time, you say like this: Aval anachnu amcha, b'nei v'risecha, b'nei Avraham oihavcha. We're the children of Avraham oihavcha, who loved you. Shenishbatala, you swore to him. B'hara Maria. Zera Yitzchak Yechidai, the descendants of Yitzchak, your unique one. Sheneka agam ezmeach. Adas Yaakov bincha b'chayrecha. Sheme'ahavoscha she'ahavta osai, from the love that you loved him. Umi simchasa she'samachta bai, and the simcha that you were mesameach in him. Karasa es shemoi Yisrael v'Yishurim. I don't think I ever paid attention to exactly what this tefillah meant. Who did the Ribono Shel Olam love, and who was the Ribono Shel Olam mesameach with? So it says, Sheme'ahavoscha she'ahavta osai. Umi simchasa she'samachta bai, karasa shema Yisrael v'Yishurim. It's going on Yaakov Avinu, that the Ribono Shel Olam loved him, and he was mesameach in him, so he gave him two names. One name because he loved him, and one name because he was mesameach with him. What are the two names? Yisrael and Yeshurun. Another thing I never noticed is that Yisrael and Yeshurun are the exact same words. Whoever even thought of that? Mamish, the exact same words. They both have Yud, Shin, Resh, Yashar. Just Yisrael has Aleph Lamed, Kale, and Yeshurun has Vav Nun. Say, well, but then they're completely different. No, everybody knows. Malachei Hashares, their names either end in Aleph Lamed or Vav Nun. Michael, Gavriel, Nuriel, Uriel, Raphael, or Matatron, and all the other Oins, right? So it either ends in Aleph Lamed or Vav. So it's the same exact name. It's just one name. One is Yashar Kale, and one is Yashar Vav Nun. Says the Goin understands this tefillah a little bit differently. The Ahava was to Avraham Avinu. Why? Because Avraham is Midas HaChesed. The Simcha was to Yitzchak Avinu. And the Ahava and the Simcha were to both, were both to Yaakov. So Avraham was Koine Ahava, and Yitzchak was Koine Simcha. So now Avraham was Koine Ahava, we get, because Avraham is Midas HaChesed. How is Yitzchak Koine Simcha? Says the Goin, the Simcha Ba, on the fourth line, number 20. This is the parish of Rav Naftali Hertz in the Siddur Hagra. It's called Imrei Shevas. You say, my Siddur Hagra doesn't have it. That's right. In your Siddur Hagra, I hope you tell me it doesn't have it, because you don't know how many places I had to look to find this. But if you find the Siddur, another Siddur Hagra, you'll know there are two versions of the Siddur Hagra. Says the Goin, the Simcha Ba me Hamtakas Hadinim. Simcha doesn't come from Midas Harachamim. What comes from Midas Harachamim? Let's say you see your parents in a good mood. So shkoyach, they gave you a gift. Of course they give you a gift. No, that's what they do. They're happy with you. Simcha only comes from Midas Hadin. When you're mamtik the din. Why? Ki b'chol makom shehayayachal liyos behepach. Whenever it could have been the opposite, b'nishapich l'toiv mizeh ba hasimcha. Simcha doesn't come from the predictable simcha. You know, sometimes you make a simcha. You have a kid, and mamish a gem, and you make a simcha right away. Okay, the simcha comes when you didn't expect it to come, and mamish it came. That's where the midah, the feeling of simcha comes from, not from the expected, from where it would have been the other way around, and your mamtik, the din, that's where simcha comes from. So simcha is not, Hashem was not mesameach be'Avraham. Hashem was mesameach be'Yitzchak. Big chiddush. So, even though in the tefillah, again, it says that Ribono Shel Olam loved Avraham, it doesn't say that the Ribono Shel Olam was mesameach be'Yitzchak, but that's how the Goin is reading it. That's Avraham was be'ava, Yitzchak was be'simcha, and Yaakov was me'avoscha she'ahavta osai u'misimchasa she'samachta bai. Says the Goin, that's why Leviim sing Shira. Why don't Kohanim sing Shira? Kohanim are Midas HaChesed, Midas HaAva. No. What kind of song? Kohanim are just Oyev Sham V'Rodev Sham. There's nothing to sing about. Everything is wonderful. Everything is dandy. The Kohanim don't need to sing. The Midah of Simcha doesn't emanate from the Kohanim. The Midah of Simcha emanates from the Leviim, because the Leviim are Sitra de Gevura. They're Midas Hadin. And even so, there's different ways of saying it. We'll say it a few different ways. Even so, if mitoich the Midas Hadin, you're able to be Mizgaber over it, that means it requires extra Rachamim. It requires extra powerful Rachamim to overcome the Din. So that's why Shira is from the Leviim, not from the Kohanim. Says the Goin, interesting thing, that's why you need Kohanim and Leviim. Leviim are Midas HaChesed, and the Kohanim are Mamtik, the Midah of the Leviim. So the Goin saying a big Chiddush. Simcha doesn't come from Midas HaChesed and Midas HaAva. Simcha comes from Midas Hadin, to overcome and to sweeten the Midas Hadin. That's where Simcha comes from. Another comment of the Goin. The Goin says like this: why dafka we have to serve Hashem? B'chol levavcha. B'chol levavcha, what does the Gemara darshan? The Shnei Yitzrecha. Just serve Hashem with the Yetzer Tov. No, that's not the Iker way to serve Hashem. The Iker way to serve Hashem is to be misgaber over the din of the Yetzer Hara, and if you're able to overcome that and be misgaber over it and to be mamtik the Yetzer Hara, that's the Iker Avodas Hashem. And he says an amazing thing. When a person is besimcha, how do they express themselves? They don't just wave their right hand. Goyim wave their right hand, right? They clap their hands. Why? The Iker Simcha is Midas Harachim and being misgaber over Midas Hadin. Says the Vilna Gaon. That's the pshat. He writes in the Yevon Shlema in a Hagah. V'zehu inyan machas kaf b'simcha. Ki kol simcha hi mismoil shenes basem hayetzer hara. So we've already explained that the midah of Gedula or Chesed is Avraham Avinu misitra di Yamina. The midah of Din only is Yitzchak Avinu. And Yaakov Avinu was able to take both midas, the midah of Chesed and the midah of Din, and it's called midah of Tiferes. He's able to fuse the two together. So now we have an extra understanding of why the Yom Tif of Sukkot is Keneged Yaakov Avinu. Because what we're learning is the Simcha, the Iker Simcha is not Midas Harachamim. If we could put the analogy this way, Rosh Hashanah, Harninu Leiloikim Muzena, Rosh Hashanah is Midas Hadin, purely Midas Hadin. What shame is Misgaber on Yom HaKippurim? Yom HaKippurim is Rachamim Gemurim. Yom HaKippurim is pure Yud Kei Vav Kei. Bnei Yissaschar writes that in the olden days, people would not say the word Yom HaKippurim. What would they call it? Yom HaKadosh. Maybe now also. Maybe in Williamsburg also, right? In holy places like over here. In fact, if you look at the Masechtas and Shas, you have Masechta Rosh Hashanah, Masechta Sukkah, right? Sukkah. You have what? Sachim, Shabbos, Megillah. Comes to Yom Kippur, Yuma. What's Pshat? So the Bnei Yissaschar says like this: on Yom Kippur, it's the Yud Kei Vav Kei that comes down to this world, manifests itself as a Yom. Mamela, you can't even say Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is Yud Kei Vav Kei. There can't even be a Masechta Yom HaKippurim. You just call it Yuma. So Rosh Hashanah is Shem Elokim. Yom Kippur is Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's very interesting. Yaakov Avinu is a mix of the two. So the Rebbe Shem gives Yaakov Avinu two Shemais, Yisrael v'Yishuran. Says the Goin also in the Siddur Agra, the same exact name, Yashar Yashar. Just when it has Kel, that's Midas Harachamim. Kel is Mitzvah Rachamim. Shem Hashem. According to Arizal, Hashem is not even part of the Yigimel Mitzvah Rachamim. Right? They're the Avos. Kel is the powerful Rachamim. And Vav Nun is Midas Hadin. Malachim that have Vav Nun, it's Midas Hadin. So Yaakov Avinu has Midas HaRachamim, Midas HaChesed of Avraham Avinu, and he has Midas Hadin of Yitzchak Avinu. In the drashas of the Nachlas David also, one of the Talmidim of Rabbi Chaim Lozner, he says, Mamish, Dover Hafla V'fella. If you ever daven Shemona Esrei, you'll notice, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Ve'elokei Yaakov. What's that Vav doing there? Adar Ya, Adar Nisht. Is it correct to have a Vav or not? If it is, it should say Elokei Avraham, Ve'elokei Yitzchak, Ve'elokei Yaakov. And if it's not, it should be Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. Then he goes further. Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibar, V'hanoira. You have a Vav, you not have a Vav. There's no rule that the last word in the sentence has a Vav. There's no such rule. No psukim, V'h. So either yes Vav or no Vav. So Nachas says like this. Avraham Avinu's Midas HaChesed. Yitzchak Avinu's Midas Hadin. They have no connection. There's no chibur between them. So it's Elokei Avraham, Midas HaChesed. Elokei Yitzchak. They have completely different midos with no connection. They don't mix. There's no resemblance. There's no mizug. It's Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak. Finally, you get to Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu is able to fuse the two together, so it's Ve'elokei Yaakov. It's a Vav HaChibur. By the way, so now we say that, right? So then you say Hakel. What's Pshat in Hakel? Say Elokeinu Ve'elokei Avosenu. Hakel is going on Elokei Avosenu. Hagadol. What's Gadol? In Vaschanan it says Ata Hachiloisa Laharis is Avda as Gadlacha. What does Rashi say is Gadlacha? It's Midas Tuvcha Chesed. Gadol is going back to Elokei Avraham. Hagibar. That's Yitzchak is Gevurais. V'hanoira. Ma noira hamakom hazeh. Who said ma noira hamakom hazeh? Yaakov Avinu. Why the vav by v'hanoira? Very pashut. Hagadol is Midas HaChesed. Hagibor is Midas HaGevurah. The two have nothing to do with each other. You can't have a vav hachibor. The hanoira is able to mix the two together. Now, what's the midah of noira? Yira. Midas HaChesed doesn't produce yira. If somebody's a mamish, a big Baal Chesed, we have nothing to be afraid of. There's no yira. What about gevuros? Also, there's no yira from gevura. Why is there no yira from gevura? Nachas David says somebody who's just gevura, you don't have fear. You have sadness because there's no takana. There's no way out. Like the Baal HaKedah says, Ki imecha haslicha. Leman tivarei. We say a passage in Ki imecha haslicha. You forgive us so that we should fear you. So everybody asks the kasha, what do you mean? Because Hashem fears us, that's why. Because Hashem forgives us, that's why we fear Him. Just if Hashem wouldn't forgive us, we'd be even more afraid of Him. So the Baal HaKedah says no. If Hashem wouldn't forgive us, then we wouldn't have any Yiras Shamayim. Why? Because a person doing Aveira, there would be no takana. If there would be no slicha, so a person would be miyayish. There would be no yira. Ki imcha haslicha. It's only because Rebbeinu Shalom is soileach to the Aveira that allows a person to have Yiras Shamayim. So Chesed doesn't allow Yira, and Gevuros doesn't allow Yira. Chesed, there's nothing to be afraid of. Gevura, it's only going to cause Tuga, it's only going to cause Yush. You need the mix of Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu is the only one who could say Manoira Hamakom Hazeh. It's a mix of Chesed and Gevura. Yaakov Avinu knows how to be mitzaref the two. That's why in Shemona Esrei there are two vavs. There's a vav by Ve'elokei Yaakov, and there's a vav by V'hanoira, says the Nachas David. So we ask, the shaila is, how does sitting in the Sukkah, how is it mamtik the dinim? How does sitting in the Sukkah, how does it sweeten the dinim? The Maharsha in the Masechta Ksubos teaches us an amazing idea. Everybody knows Yud Kei Vav Kei is Midas Harachamim. Everybody knows Elokim is Midas Hadin. What about Adnos? Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud. As far as I know, it's not so clear. The Shem Adnos, is it Midas HaRachamim? Is it Midas Hadin? The Marsha, in the Gemara Ksubas on Daf Heyam and Aleph, look on the back in the Gemara. The Gemara says, Darash bar kapara, Gedolim maseh tzadikim yoiser mi maseh shamayim v'aretz. Because shamayim was one yad, aretz was one yad. Maseh yedeim shel tzadikim, two yados. Shenemar mochoin l'shivtecha pa'alta Hashem, mikdash Hashem konenu yadecha. Why do you need two yados for the Beis Hamikdash? Says the Marsha, look carefully, look at number 14, look at the pasuk. Tiviyemoy v'sitayemoy bahar nachloscha machayin l'shivtecha pa'alta Hashem mikdash Hashem, but they're two different shemois. There's Yud Kei Vav Kei and there's Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. And what word is in between Yud Kei Vav Kei and Aleph Dalet Nun Yud? Mikdash. That means the Mikdash bridges the gap between the Yud Kei Vav Kei and the Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. Why do you need two hands? Says Marsha, the two hands doesn't mean two hands. One hand is the Tzad Yamin, Midas HaChesed. One hand is the Tzad Small, Midas Hadin. The Mikdash is able to bring together the two Midas, the two Shemois. The Tzad Yamin, says the Marsha, is Yud Kei Vav Kei on the right side of the Mikdash. The Tzad Small is Aleph Dalet Nun Yud, the left side of the Mikdash, that's Midas Hadin. The Shem Adnus is Midas Hadin. The Mikdash is able to put the two together. The Shamayim is Yud Kei Vav Kei. Hashamayim, Shamayim li Yud Kei Vav Kei. Downstairs on this world, it's Adoi Shem, Hashem's my master. The Yud Kei Vav Kei is Hashemayim, Shemayim Hashem. The Oretz is the Adnos. The Mikdash is Mitzaref the two. That's what it means. The Mikdash needs two Yados. We asked the question. The Arizal tells us that the Yom Tov of Sukkah is not just Smoiloi, not just Yeminoi Techabakeni. It's Smoiloi Tachas L'Roshi also. Why does it also have to be Smoiloi Tachas L'Roshi? Because Sukkah is Man Simchasena. The Iker Simcha is not only Yeminoi Techabakeni. That's not Simcha. Of course, Midas Harachamim will give us good Zmanim. Real Simcha is when the Tzad Yamin is able to take the Tzad Small, is able to take the Midas Hadin, be mamtik the Midas Hadin. The Chibuk, like the Gra says, is not biyad achas. It's not only with the right hand, it's with the left hand as well. It's the two yados coming together. It's the Tzad Small of Small Taz Roshi and the Yeminoi Techabakeni. That's what the Simcha of Zman Simchasenu is. By sitting in the Sukkah, how we mamtik the dinim? Because we started off the Shiur, the words of the Aruch HaNer are that Gedola Sukkah sheyesh by Shemois Kfulim. There are two Shemois of Hashem. What are the two Shemois of Hashem? It's not only Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yom Kippur is a great day. Yom Kippur is a wonderful day. Loi hayu yomim tovim liYisrael k'yom HaKippurim. But Yom Kippur is not a Yom Simcha because it's just Rachamim Gemurim. And the Goin says the midah of Avraham was midas HaChesed, but not Simcha. Simcha comes from Sukkah, because Sukkah is not just V'yiminoi Techabakeni. It's also Smoiloi Tachas L'Roshi. It's a Yom Adin. We're Nidon Al HaMayim. V'chol Chayei Ha'adam Tluyim B'mayim. Be'ikr, it's the most severe of all the Midos Hadin. The Torah writes, more than Pesach, more than Shavuos, more even than Rosh Hashanah. Ikr Chayei Ha'adam Toloi B'mayim. But al yedei the mitzvah of Sukkah is mitzaref the two shemos. It's mitzaref the shem of Adnos, which the Marsha Megala to us is Midas Hadin. It's mitzaref the Yud Kei Vav Kei. By the way, now we have an added insight into why the kedusha of the Sukkah is like kedushas Beis Hamikdash. The same way the Beis Hamikdash is Mikdash between the Yud Kei Vav Kei and Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. Mikdash Hashem Koinenu Yadecha. So too the Sukkah is mitzaref the two shemos. Yud Kei Vav Kei and Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. So what we're trying to suggest is that the Smoiloi Tachas L'Roshi, the Yeminoi Techabakeni of Sukkos, that chibuk is what is mamtik the din. It's the Yeminoi Techabakeni, which is the Tkiyas Kaf, which is the chibuk of the Shtei Yodayim together, which are mitzaref the two Shemos of Hashem, but ultimately Midas Harachamim is Misgaber and is Mamtik the Din through the mitzvah of Sukkah. I believe that the Arizal says exactly what we're saying. Mamish B'Kitzer Nimratz, look at number 28. The Arizal says, again, we know the Arizal says that Sukkah is V'yiminoi Techabekeni. But if you look at number 20 at the end, he says, you look at the Shem Sukkah, V'yichavein al yidei Shem zeh, she'oila chesed, lechaber havaya aleph dal nun yud. You're going to put together the two Shemos. Besoid chibuk hayamin. That's the yisoid of the chibuk. The chibuk of the yamin is not just the yamin by itself. It's the hitztarfus of the yud kevavke and the aleph dal nun yud. So maybe we could say like this. The Bnei Yisachar says that Shabbos Nachamu, we say Laka Yisra b'Keflayim, Shenamar Kilaku Keflayim b'Chol Chatoiseh, U'Misnachem b'Keflayim, Shenemar Nachamu Nachamu. So, for the Bnei Yisachar, what's the double Nachama? He says the double Nachama is like this: Nachamu Nachamu Ami Yoimar Elokeichem. Amira is Lashon Raka. But it doesn't say Yoimar Yud Kevavke. It's Yoimar Elokeichem. If you could get Midas Hadin to be maskim to the Nechama, that's Gufa, a double Nechama. Because now you're not just getting Rachamim, you're getting Rachamim B'din. It's Kiflayim. It's a Kiflayim type of Nechama. And so how we were Laka B'Kiflayim? Because it's Pi Hashem Diber. It's Diber Kashos, Pi Hashem is Yud Kevavke. But the Nechama is double because not only is Midas Harachamim being maskim, now even Midas Hadin doesn't have a taina against us. So the schar of Sukkah is mechupelas, and the kedusha is mechupelas. And yichbelu sorim min hashamayim. Why yichbelu sorim min hashamayim? Because not only are you getting schar that you're bringing down Midas Harachamim on Klal Yisrael, but now you're also getting the Midas Hadin to be maskim, to agree, to confer, to be makayim, to give an amen. Amen is 91. To give a kiyum to the rachamim of the Yimei HaRachamim and the Yom Naram, and that's the inyan kafula of the Sukkah, where the Yimei Yom Naram Rosh Hashanah is only Harnino L'Elekim Uzeinu. The Yom Naram of Yom Kippur is only the Yud Kevavke. And the Hamtakas Hadinim of the Sukkah is mitzdaref, the two Shemos, where not only is it Rachamim Gemurim, but it's even more than that. It's the Rachamim being misgaber over the Midas Hadin of the Shem Adnos, and we're Zoicha to an extra measure, just like we say by Shalosh Shudas. What's Shalosh Shudas called? Rava de Ravin. What's Rava de Ravin? Super Rachmanis. What's Pshat? Why is it called Super Rachmanis? Because really Mincha time is a time of din. So if you could have Rachamim at a time of din, that must mean it's Super Rachamim. Otherwise you would never have Rachamim then. It's the same thing with Sukkah. Yom Kippur is just Shem Havaya. But you could imagine the Rachamim and the Simcha of Sukkot. Not only is it Yud Kevov, it's Yud Kevov being misgaber over the Adnos. And that's the Simcha of Zman Simcha Seinu, like the Vilna Gaon says. Simcha is not only from Rachamim, Simcha is from Hamtakas Hadinim. So we should tackle Obi Zoicha to Rachamim, Merubim, and Mimal Hashem Kol, Mishal Seinu L'Toiva. Mirz Hashem, we should be able to get together, Gezun Taheit. Mirz Hashem many times for Limanat Torah B'Ravim. Shkoyach.
And your name is Yaakov.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.